Oh, there you go. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Police Services Board meeting 2115 and August 26th. There we go. All right, so we will continue. So looking at the agenda, is there a conflict of interest? Okay, make approval of the agenda. Oh, sorry, Bridget.
Sorry, Jared. Could you just ask everybody who's not speaking just to mute their microphone, because it's really difficult to hear you when there's background noise.
Everyone, I heard the.
I'll follow the same.
Okay, is that better, Bridget? Thumbs up, right on. Okay, so may I get an approval of the agenda? Jeff, Bridget, thank you. All in favor? Good. And then the adoption of the minutes from the last meeting held on July 15th. May I have a motion for that? Very good. Jimmy, Bridget, all in favor? Good. And then we'll start with the communications from the Ministry of the Solicitor General. First, I would ask the chief to help us understand the update on the POA modernizing and streamlining initiatives.
Thank you. So this refers to the implementation of a number of improvements in the Provincial Offences Act court throughout the province of Ontario. For example, instead of in-person service of Part 3 summonses to individuals, a new regulation now allows for the service by registered mail, courier, or email to that person, or to that person's licensed lawyer or paralegal where applicable. It's also effective November 1st, 2021, clerks of the court can assume some functions formerly performed by the Justice of the Peace. For example, clerks will be able to grant extensions of time to pay a fine, and they will be able to review tickets. And if the ticket is complete and regular on its face, and if the defendant has failed to respond to the ticket and it's deemed not to be in dispute, they can enter a conviction and impose a set fine. So this enables a more efficient use of judicial resources. There are also updates to Provincial Offences Act forms that will be communicated through temporary inserts outlining information on these new tickets until the new books are actually in place. So effective November 1st, the new forms will reflect that the remote appearance methods for Provincial Offences Act proceedings will be available, and that if a clerk has entered a conviction against them, they may apply to a Justice of the Peace for a review of their conviction.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from anyone? No? Okay. Next is the crisis call diversion.
So this is sharing an implementation guide for a program that the OPP have introduced through a pilot project, which embeds a mental health crisis worker into their communication center. So the crisis call diversion can respond to calls involving acute crisis situations such as mental health or substance abuse issues, relationship conflicts and family concerns. And then they have to have consent to speak to a crisis worker. This allows for a phone-based support by mental health crisis workers in order to provide support and connect individuals to community services. And ultimately, this will assist in reducing future police interactions. So they've given this framework as a guide for other police services should they want to go down that path. And I can say that Sergeant Carla Stacey of the Vulnerable Sector Unit from here has been working with our addictions mental health over the past quite a few months now to develop an MOU or Memorandum of Understanding where Kingston Police can divert priority 3 and 4, which are less severe calls to our crisis workers. And this includes working with our IT to ensure that our communications infrastructure could support this seamless transfer of calls to our community partners. So as I said, we have a Memorandum of Understanding that's just been developed, and the next steps are going to involve some training for our communication staff as well as our crisis workers. And then we will be piloting our project as well.
Very good. It'll be interesting how that evolves. So pretty good. Okay, Bridget.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks for that, Chief McNeely. Will we receive a report in maybe 6 months' time, or to find out how it actually works, how successful it is?
Yes, exactly. We will be monitoring and keeping track of how it's going so that we will understand what next steps might be. And this is part of our whole grant that we've gotten or we've received. And so it expires the end of next March 31st. And hopefully we'll enter the next stage of the grant and we'll be able to go further with this project. This will be part of the data that we'll be collecting.
Great, thanks. Looking forward to it.
Okay, next would be the updated police services advisor zone assignments.
Yes, so as we all know, that police service advisors play an important role in providing support and advice to police services boards and others on the delivery of policing in Ontario. So effective August the 1st, Lindsay Gray will be assigned to our Zone 2, with Graham White becoming an acting manager of the Inspectorate of Policing Services liaison unit until the end of 2021, while he's replacing someone on mat leave. So our backup advisor then is also going to be Dave Tilley.
Okay, congratulations to Grant. We have the risk-driven tracking database for 2020 annual report.
So the risk-driven tracking database supports our Kingston Community Risk Watch situation table by providing a standardized means of gathering de-identified information on situations of acutely elevated risk. So it's also a tool that can be used to collect data for our local priority risks and evolving trends, and that helps the community safety and well-being planning process. So this was utilized also in the Kingston Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan that was adopted by Council in June of 2021. So this 2020 provincial report lists the top 3 factor categories for the province. And those risk factors were identified as mental health, criminal involvement, and drugs. And in the province, the top vulnerable age group was between 40 to 59. Mental health was the top risk category for every age group, as I'm pointing out some highlights from this data. And in the East region, of which Kingston is part of, the top 3 categories again were mental health, criminal involvement, and drugs as well. In Kingston, though, and the top 3 risk categories for our risk table were mental health, drugs, and housing. And our top vulnerable age group was 12 to 17. Just for comparison purposes.
Okay. And does the city get these stats? Do you know?
Pardon me?
Does the city of Kingston get these stats?
Yes, I've shared that because it's part of our community safety and well-being plan. And so in the fall, we'll be meeting again and this data will become useful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Thanks. And if you could talk to about the police review director.
Okay, so this is a new guideline pursuant to Section 56 of the Police Services Act with respect to publishing disciplinary hearings, decisions on the OIPRD website, and this came into effect June 3rd, 2021. So these decisions are posted without any amendments, redactions, or revisions. And it's important that everyone that's involved in the disciplinary process is mindful of privacy considerations and federal legislations. And such should be raised at the hearing officer level and dealt with at the hearing stage. So really everything that is in this document then gets published on the OIPRD website, not specifically to do with public complaints that have hearings.
Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. Next is the new Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Incident Reporting Requirements Regulation.
So this new regulation under the Occupational Health and Safety Act came into force July 1st of 2021 and incorporates the critical injury definition and streamlines reporting requirements previously set out in several regulations. And it makes it all into one regulation that applies to all workplaces under the Act. So really, the regulation sets out a set of written reporting requirements.
And now if we could look at the release of the Ministry of Education's new anti-sex trafficking policy framework for provincially funded school boards.
And this is the first of its kind for an education sector in Canada, for Ontario school boards to build upon to create a local anti-sex trafficking protocol in order to protect children and youth from sexual exploitation. And so school board protocols must include raising awareness and understanding of sex trafficking, response and support for students at risk, training for school board employees, and accountability and evaluations. So school boards and police services are expected to work together to develop a police school board protocol that ensures a shared understanding of each other's roles, procedures, and decision-making authority. So built into the protocol are school board responsibilities, and those are to notify police of school-related incidents, investigate incidents involving suspension or expulsion. At the same time, police investigate those incidents that are underway and contact parents when students are to be interviewed by police. So the goal is really to have anti-sex trafficking protocols in place in all Ontario school boards by January of 2022.
And you said this is fairly new?
Yes, this is new.
Very good.
And I have to say that, we have done some training with our community partners already over the past few years. And we have done some training in the schools. So the school board staff have been trained through a program put out by Tanae and Nagy, and she has a program that will help educate students. So we were ahead of the curve on this as well. So it'll be interesting how this all unfolds as we work together to move forward.
Jimmy, did you have a question? You're on mute, Jimmy. He's gonna have to repeat all that.
Yeah, my question, she already answered that. I was going to ask if the police will be partnering in the training sessions and spreading the awareness. But is that possible to please keep involved the ongoing the training, providing the training and awareness to the community and to the school board and the children?
Yes, I'm hoping that will be part of it. I mean, those are the ongoing discussions that we'll be having, our school resource officers and our core unit with the schools themselves to develop what that training will look like.
Is that parent council will be involved in such training and such educational piece to be aware and send the awareness to the parents as well and the guidelines to parents?
I'm sure that the schools will make their the councils aware of that as well and share that information with the parents, especially when the education occurs and when any other investigations do occur. So I'm sure that would be part of their process.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, the next subject is the revocation of the Rule 17 of the OIPRD Rules of Procedure.
Yes, so Rule 17 of the OIPRD was revoked June the 14th of 2021. So prior to that date, Rule 17 allowed for the director of the OIPRD with authority to reconsider all screening decisions that were under Section 60 and 61 of the Police Services Act. And under that area is where the director can decide not to deal with a complaint if it's been more than 6 months since the incident has occurred, or if it's been deemed to be vexatious. It also falls under complaints made to the OIPRD when a police agency has investigated it and has found it to be unsubstantiated, and then the complainant can ask the OIPRD for a review. So that's the two examples under Section 60 and 61. It also it also involves the post-screening decisions. So the decision has been revoked. This Rule 17 has been revoked, which means that the director will deny requests to reconsider these decisions arising from classifying these complaints or reinvestigating, retaining the investigations for review. And the only means to challenge the director's statutory decision is by way of a judicial review application to the Superior Court of Justice. So that's basically what this Rule 17 revocation means.
Okay. Thank you.
This all came about as a result of a Court of Appeal decision, and that's why this is coming forward.
Okay. Next is the Ontario Police Health and Safety Committee guidance for Note 14, field drug testing revision.
So this revision has been made to the Ontario Police Health and Safety Committee, a guidance on the hazards associated with field drug testing of suspicious substances. And it reflects an amendment to the regulation 833 on the control of exposure to biological and chemical agents. So in a nutshell, using these test kits to identify unknown substances can result in exposure to our members of unknown hazards when they're done out in the field. And so as a result, they talk about training needs and assessments should be conducted to those people who are actually permitted to do these tests, these field tests, and when and how it shall be conducted. Protective equipment is really important to prevent contact with the skin, splashes to the eyes, as well as inhalation of gases. So tests really should be done in a controlled environment with exhaust ventilation and ready access to eye wash stations and those kinds of things. So here at the Kingston Police, we have a drug testing room at the station available for this purpose, including a fume hood and PPEs that are available, first aid kit with eye rinse, and it also has a nearby eye wash station. So clear signage of proper use of PPEs is on display within this room, as well as biohazard disposal garbage can. So testing of drugs is not done out in the field, but rather in a controlled environment. So this guidance note has been shared with our members as well as with the Joint Health and Safety Committee.
Thanks. So if we could talk about the unmarked burials at Indian residential schools. That was the subject.
Alt Chief's Bulletin is the commitment of the Ontario government to work with the Indigenous communities to support the identification, investigation, protection, and commemoration of residential school burial sites across the country.
Okay. And there's been amendments to the Firearms Act?
Yeah, so effective July 7th, amendments to the Firearms Act include mandatory lifetime background checks for licensed applicants, which will be completed by the firearms program and a provincial chief firearms officer. And this makes mandatory considerations of eligibility criteria that may span a person's lifetime, including a history of domestic violence or making threats online, those types of things. It also includes changes to the automatic authorization to transport for restricted and prohibited firearms as conditions of a license for certain routine and lawful activities. So these changes remove 4 transportation activities, leaving 2 provisions as conditions for transporting of a firearm to and from a shooting range and transporting to a newly acquired firearm back to the home after purchase.
And 'tis the season, so responding to animals left in hot motor vehicles.
Yeah, this is a reminder for the public to ensure pets are not left unattended in a vehicle during the hot summer months and to call 911 if they see an animal in immediate danger. So pursuant to the Provincial Animal Welfare Act, or the PAWS Act, police officers, First Nation constables, and animal welfare inspectors may enter a motor vehicle to remove animals in critical distress pursuant to this act. This triggers notification to an animal welfare inspector.
And I think we have a amendment adding into the communications, and that is for the Zone 2 meeting. Is that correct, Donna?
I think that,
That can be done later. That's under the OAPSB.
Later?
Under item C, yeah.
Okay. So then we're going to go to the CAPG conference. And this is basically just September 28th to the 30th. And I believe it is in.
It's a virtual conference. So if any members want to attend, you could let me know, because there's one registration fee for up to 10 registrants. So even if, and I believe sessions could be recorded. So even if you can't sit in on it as it's happening, you might be able to go in on the link later and view it. So
Okay. So we'll
just
do
wonder if
that.
there's an interest in registering, making a 10-person registration.
Okay. So you're just going to register for one and then we can access it via that one registration?
Yeah, or I can submit all your names and then you'll each, I believe that's how it would happen. They would send an
Bridget, you were
email to each of you.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yep. We'll see. Okay, then there's the OAPSB Executive Director announcement. That's Fred, who's stepping away from that.
Okay,
And
sorry, Mr. Chair, there's one more under the CAPG. There was a second letter asking if the board wished to sponsor the virtual conference.
yeah, and I believe we do that, correct?
We have in the past, so if we want to continue, we could have a motion. In the past, we've contributed $500 towards the, to defray some of the costs.
Yeah, if we could have a motion to support that. Jimmy, Bridget, Jeff, all in favor? Good. Thank you. If you could arrange that, Donna, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. And then Fred Costigan has stepped down as the executive director, and the announcement of Mr. Bruce Chapman will be taking his place. So thank you for your 12 years, Fred, and welcome, Mr. Chapman. Okay. Next is from Diane Smithson, and that's the OAPSB Zone 2 messaging from Neil Fennell. And that was just a thank you for that. Okay. And then we come to let's see what's this. Okay. Next is to Chief Angie McNeely, and that is this is the report on administration of public complaints from January 1st to June 30th, 2021.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think you missed a couple of things under the OAPSB. And one was that add-on about the Zone 2 meeting. Whether
Okay,
members
that's where you
would
want
wish,
to-
yeah, whether members wish to attend, we will need to let them know.
Yeah, okay. We'll do that by email,
If you,
or do you need
if
to right
members,
now?
if members wanted to let me know, then I can do one response to the Secretary Treasurer there.
Okay, well, I'll definitely check out some of the items that'll be in it. Okay, no one else? And then what was the other one, Donna? You said a couple.
Oh, there was a feedback. The OAPSB sent the feedback on some of the regulations being developed. Yeah, they mentioned 4 draft regulations under the Community Safety and Policing
Yeah,
Act.
I'm just I am looking at something from the OPP, and then following the communications. No, that's for the agenda. We just did that one. That's fall meeting being held in Pickett. Is that the one you're talking about?
It's the one that the letter from the OAPSB. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but there might have been an email that attached the various responses that the OAPSB sent to the ministry just to comment on some of the regulations that were being drafted.
Hmm.
It came just before the announcement about thanking Fred for his 12 years of being the ED. So it's the document just before that. And it's really about the OAPSB, it's input from many sources that the government's asking for. And so the OAPSB provided their input on active attacker incidents, alternative provisions for policing, code of conduct for police service board members, and the Ontario Police Arbitration and Adjudication Commission. And so they sent 4 separate updates as to what they would like to have entered. And that was sent out to all the boards so they could see that.
Bridget?
I just wondered if we could get a bit of a response from the chief, what she thought of those, the responses to those 4 changes.
Yeah, I mean, they're consistent with the chiefs of police have been putting input in. We've had subject matter experts at the tables. We've had community groups at the table. So it's the response here are quite consistent with what's being said from our perspective as well.
Great to know. Thanks.
Okay, found it. All right.
And the only other thing I think that came up with respect to, you know, the different meetings for your Zone 2 meeting, it just basically advised that the Thursday evening is no longer going to be available as just Friday's meeting, and that it's where it's going to be held. And as Donna had already mentioned about how many people wanting to attend, and then she would give notice. And really, it outlined that, you know, all the public health safety precautions and everything have been taken into account for this meeting to encourage people to attend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Donna, I'll go to that. Okay, and then delegations, there isn't any, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, next are the reports from Chief McNeely. And this is the public complaints for half the year of 2021.
Yeah, and I've got Sergeant Jeff Thompson, and he's here to be able to talk to this and speak to this to the board.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief, and good afternoon to the board. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Just before we begin, Staff Sergeant Murdoch, who was the author of this report, asked that I express her regrets. She has a previous engagement today with the Elizabeth Fry Society Board, so she couldn't be here. So this report covers the period between January 1st and June 30th of this year. During that time period, there were 25 public complaints that were received by the Professional Standards Office. This represents an increase of 11 or the same reporting period in 2020. And I'll speak more to that a little bit later on to put it in some context. The status of these investigations currently were that 9 were screened out by the OIPRD on the face of them based on their criteria. 4 were deemed unsubstantiated through investigation. 0 had been substantiated, and then the remainder were resolved by other methods as approved and in cooperation with the OIPRD. In terms of the increase of 11 over the same time period in 2020, in looking back over the previous years, that actually puts us back where we have been historically. In 2016, we had 24. In 2017, there were 23. Through 2018, 2019, and 2020, there was a decline. So this puts us back in approximately the same range that we would expect. In terms of the investigations that we did have in 2020, under item 3, all of those investigations that have been completed, and we've reported back to the OIPRD on them. The only other investigations I'll be reporting on today are local inquiries. These are inquiries or complaints that come directly to the Professional Standards Office that are typically less serious in nature and that we handle within the organization. Again, this covers the time period between January 1st and June 30th of this year. We've had a total of 9 so far for this year, which is an increase from 7 during the same time period of last year. So approximately within what we would expect over last year as well. And subject to any questions that you might have, that's the totality of the report. Go ahead.
Have a question?
Thanks, Jared, and through you. Thanks, Jeff, for that report. I was particularly interested in how it did compare to last year. The 9 that are screened out, you said they were screened out based on criteria. Can you just share with us a little bit what those criteria are?
Yeah, so the OIPRD in their initial screening presumptively screen everything in. So they assume that everything is to be assigned for investigation. And then they review the content of the complaint, and they have criteria that are set out in legislation to which they can screen investigations out. So it might not be in the public interest. They might deem it to be frivolous, or might be beyond the 6-month window in which they can consider investigations. Occasionally, they do screen in investigations that are beyond that 6-month window, but there has to be supporting criteria or a valid reason that the complainant has brought forward.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Jeff, for your time and input.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And results for the June 30th, 2021 budgetary. Quarterly budget.
And I have John House here to report on that.
Oh, great. Good afternoon, John.
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. A little bit of unmuting and muting issues there. This report wasn't ready. The meeting last month was too early, so I apologize if it's a little bit late, but to the end of June, we had a deficit of $736,000. We had spent $21,317,000 against the budget of $20,571,000. Some of the big items there, if you look at the revenue and recovery, $1.2 million actual against the budget of $2 million, a deficit of $793,000. Big item there was the grant money, which hadn't come in yet. In fact, it was only a couple of weeks ago that we heard from the provincial government, and they finally signed off on the CSPT grant. And they told us those 2 payments would be coming shortly to get us caught up. Those payments are $321,000 a quarter. So with those 2 payments, and we did get $36,000 in last week from the community policing grant. So that's $678,000 of grant money that has come in August, which goes a long way to reduce that deficit on that line. So that's good news. The other information there, alarm licensing revenue was on budget. Paid duty was a little bit unfavorable. There wasn't much activity in the first 6 months, but I can tell you in the last couple of months, there's been a huge uptick in paid duty, what with constructions and such. Expense recovery was unfavorable by $133,000. Again, or excuse me, it was favorable. And that was just the timing. There was one large payment we got for one of these secondments at the beginning of the year. It covers 12 months. So that's just a timing issue there. And other revenues such as background checks, auction proceeds, $87,000 unfavorable. With the COVID, we're still running a little bit behind on where we would normally see background check revenue be. I'm hopeful that as fall comes and the Queen students and St. Lawrence goes back, we'll see an uptick in that. On a side note, we have got a bicycle auction scheduled for October the 23rd at the Memorial Center. Now that the restrictions have eased a bit, so we are going ahead with the bike auction October 23rd. Any questions on the top section there on revenues and recovery? Once those grants are recorded, we'll see that problem go away. In terms of operating expenses, total operating costs of $22,577,000 against the budget of $22,634,000. $57,000 difference there, favorable, or excuse me, unfavorable. The salaries and wages, 19.5 against 19.4, $87,000 less there. When we looked at wages, overtime is only unfavorable by $11,000, which is good considering that we had spent $23,000 to support patrol for staff shortages during that time period. St. Patrick's Day, we incurred a couple of $1,000s. We've had a few major incidences in the city in the first 6 months. We spent $14,000 on the shooting incident, and there was a homicide investigation, 27, and then a joint drug operation with it was 20,000. Aside of all that, we've also spent $46,000 of overtime on pandemic COVID-related items, which I did not list there. So considering all the things that are going on, we actually are doing pretty good, I think, on overtime. Base wages were favorable by $208,000. We've been hiring a lot of fourth class in the first 6 months, and that's creating some savings. There were a few vacancies, and those vacancies in the first 6 months were covered by part-time employees. So we saw a little bit of unfavorability on the part-time in the first 6 months. Fringe benefits were unfavorable by $277,000. That's normal. The statutory benefits all are paid in the first half of the year, and then the last half we should see that swing to favorability. So no other issues there that I can see. Supplies and materials were unfavorable. Excuse me, supplies and materials unfavorable by $145,000. A couple of big items there, and one item I didn't list. We had four big payments in the first 6 months for renewal of software licenses that cover the whole year. Those four payments totaled $604,000. So because the budget's evenly spread by month, those four payments alone cause us to be about $302,000 unfavorable in the first 6 months, and that would disappear as we go in the last 6 months just because of timing. Take that into account, and then the few items I've listed there. Fuel continues to be a little bit favorable in spite of the gas price. We've been using a little bit less fuel than we had budgeted for, which is helping. Education and training was favorable by 39. A lot of things continue to be virtual, and in the first 6 months, there weren't a lot of sessions going on. Travel is favorable by 36. Still with COVID, nobody's traveling too much. Investigative services, maybe a bit of a timing, but there were fewer things going on there. So we're 68,000 favorable on that. So if you take into account those four big payments we made, and then the few favorabilities gets us back to where we are at 145 unfavorable. But as time goes by, it's just a timing issue that should go away. And that is where we're at. Are there any questions on that? I think things are progressing as planned, and at this point, 6 months, I think we're still okay.
Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Then we have the quarterly statistical report for the first 6 months of the year, and I guess this is like crimes, drug offenses. Chief?
Yeah, so this is some of the highlights from the statistical report, which is from January to June of 2021. So we can see that our crimes against persons have increased in the first 6 months compared to the same time in 2020 by about 17%. So the driver in these areas are assaults, criminal harassment, harassing phone calls, and threats. The pandemic to some extent may play a role, as we have been in lockdown for a portion of this time, leading people to be more indoors and at home and online, and therefore increasing the potential of online victimization, including frauds. Robberies, we have an increase in robberies. They tend to be as a result of the drug subculture. And the theft of motor vehicles have increased. About 65% of the vehicles have been recovered, and most of them have been recovered locally. About 80% of the vehicles stolen were unlocked or unknown if locked. Most of the high-end vehicles have not been recovered, which is a provincial trend. And these vehicles are targeted by organized crime groups to ship overseas. So of note, our thefts have decreased, and these include in totality things like shoplifting or theft from vehicles, that kind of thing. And again, our calls for service, we're looking at a little bit more in the first half of 2021 compared to 2020.
Okay.
And so what I can also talk about is our use of force annual or quarterly report. And it is from April to June of 2021. And this report captures use of force submitted by responding officers during that time frame. In total, there were 28 incidents that were reported. Reports were filed, and that was compared to 26 incidents in the first quarter of 2021. And just as a reminder, so the calls, just to go through a few calls of interest that are included as examples so that you have some understanding of the kinds of calls again that we were responding to. So firearms were discharged in 7 incidents, all to do with injured animals. There were 14 incidents where the emergency response unit was deployed for drug search warrants, as well as a firearm search warrant, a number of high-risk vehicle stops where occupants were known to be violent or to carry firearms, as well as an arrest of a male that was armed with a knife. So in these incidents, handguns were drawn, and in one incident, a CEW was also displayed. Other highlights include the following, where patrol responded to a call where 2 males forcefully entered a residence. Police searched the residence and arrested both males. Officers had a handgun drawn and a CEW displayed to effect the arrest. Another example is patrol located a vehicle and occupants involved in an armed robbery using a firearm and an edged weapon. And both firearm and edged weapon were visible on the accused persons at the time of arrest. Officers had their handguns drawn during this incident. Patrol officers attended an apartment for a volatile male armed with 2 knives. De-escalation techniques were initiated with the male not complying. The CEW was deployed successfully and the male was taken into custody without further incident. And finally, police attended a call for a male threatening to stab people in an apartment. Police began with de-escalation techniques as well as a CEW displayed, and the subject complied with commands and was taken into custody. So it should be noted that verbal interactions and de-escalation methods are utilized as part of our police interactions with the public in these kinds of incidents as described.
Okay, thank you. And then there's the September intake of new recruits.
Yeah, and I could just follow up there. I know that Bridget Doherty had asked to be on to add about the crime severity index, to talk a little bit about the crime severity index. So I can just follow up a little bit on that. So the Kingston Census Metropolitan Area, or the CMA, analysis of the 2020 crime stats includes not only the Kingston Police jurisdiction, but also South Frontenac OPP, as well as Loyalist OPP detachments. So our CMA includes not just Kingston jurisdiction. And so our overall crime severity index is 70.6, which is a 4% increase from 2019. We ranked 18 out of the 35 CMAs, where 1 is the highest, and CSI and 35 is the lowest. The drivers of the overall crime severity index for the Kingston Police include increases in assaults, robberies, uttering threats, break-ins, identity fraud, as well as increases as a result of targeted enforcement action taken by our Internet Child Exploitation Unit. So in terms of homicides, Kingston Police had 2 homicides in 2019 and 2 in 2020, all were solved. But in the 2020, we had an additional homicide, but that was outside our jurisdiction, so it wasn't within the Kingston Police jurisdiction. So that additional homicide impacted, of course, on the increase in the crime severity index under our CMA. So in 2020, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic may have impacted crime statistics due to stay-at-home orders and non-essential services closing or altering their operations. So the behavior of our citizens was also altered, with citizens spending more time at home and online. This increased the potential for victimization through cyber-related crimes such as identity thefts and threats. In other words, this has shifted the types of crimes that are being reported. For example, there was a decrease in reports of theft, such as shoplifting due to closure of businesses, but an increase in cyber-related crimes. And this is, again, a trend that's seen across the country. Changes in the administration of bail programs compounded by the pandemic and courts unable to operate at normal capacity and reducing the number of persons held in correctional institutions have meant that persons charged with offenses who do not pose a public safety risk are released back into the community with conditions. And this has created a potential for recidivism and impacts crimes such as break-and enters and robberies and assaults. Just some comments on our crime severity index.
Are we thanks for that. And do we track like where in our community the crime increases, or is it pretty well a blanket statement across the community? You know,
yeah, this would be a blanket statement sort of across, but we do track as to where the incidents occur, so we do have that. So the next would be our new recruits.
Yeah.
Or are we on to that? Let me just see. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if we could, and then we'll do a motion to bring them in.
Sorry, where are we here? Yes, motion. Okay. So I'll give you a bit of a bio of our two recruits here. So the first is Lyndon Burt. And these are recruits that are going to be for the September intake at the Ontario Police College. So Lyndon was born and raised in Ottawa and graduated from South Carleton High School in 2006. He next attended St. Lawrence College, where he completed the diploma requirements for the Police Foundations in 2008. After college, he traveled extensively over a 5-year period, backpacking in Europe and Turkey, Croatia, South Africa, Australia, Asia, Peru. And since 2012, he's been a supervisor in an establishment in Ottawa. In 2014, Lyndon became a volunteer firefighter with the City of Ottawa. And in 2016, he completed the Fire Academy, which included 2 weeks of firefighter training in Texas, along with his certification as a NFPA firefighter first 1 and 2, and an NFPA hazmat awareness and operations. He received a certificate of achievement for the position of class captain for the duration of the course. He was currently acting lieutenant at Fire Station 94 in Manotick, and now he's hired with us. In addition to his work as a volunteer firefighter, he's been a Big Brother since 2013 with Big Brothers and Sisters of Ottawa. In 2018, he received an award as Volunteer of the Year for the Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Lyndon feels that his work with Big Brothers and Big Sisters has been one of the most rewarding experiences of his life, and he's been matched with a youth with whom he has been with since the first day. Lyndon has also assisted with in-school diversion programs that help at-risk children build new relationships in an environment that is conducive to learning and team building. So we welcome him to the Kingston Police. And David Engelberg. David was born in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and moved to Lakefield area near Peterborough when he was a youth. He graduated from Lakefield District Secondary School and obtained his Bachelor of Science in Psychology honors degree from Trent University with a major in psychology and a minor in biology. He then attended Durham College between 2019 and 2020, where he completed an advanced law enforcement and investigations graduate certificate. While attending Trent, David worked as a landscape technician with its facilities management department, and was an exam proctor with its Center of Academic Testing. Since 2020, David has worked at Queen's University as a casual security patroller and as a host with Fit for Life. Since coming to Kingston, David has volunteered his time with St. Vincent de Paul Society, preparing and serving hot meals and assisting with the back warehouse where clothing is stored. He has also volunteered with the Lakefield Community Food Bank, sorting and organizing food to be distributed to families, a youth mentor for Youth Unlimited Gym Night, and a safety spotter with Survivors Abreast Dragon Boat, and as an assistant coach for Special Olympics basketball. David has toured Europe and Israel and plays the violin and guitar. He lives in Kingston with his partner, Aliyah, and we welcome David to the Kingston Police. You're on
You're
mute.
muted.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so may I have a motion to accept these two new recruits, please? Jeff, Bridget, all in favor? Very good. Thank you. Okay. And there is no unfinished business.
Oh, sorry, there's one more motion that has to do with the add-on
Let me
for
just
the
find that.
contractual agreement.
Okay, hold on a second here. Right. So it's requested that the board endorse the agreement with the province regarding funding from April 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022 under Ontario's strategy to end human trafficking, as outlined in the correspondence dated August the 19th from the OPP Counter Exploitation and Missing Persons section. So this is the third year that we've received this funding of $17,400 to help offset partial costs of officer salary to enhance investigations and the prevention of human trafficking. As I mentioned, again, the funding term is for April 1st to March 31st, 2022.
May I have a motion to accept this grant? Jeff, Bridget, Jimmy, all in favor? Very good. Thank you very much. Okay. Now on to new business. This is from the City of Kingston. Attention to the chief. And that's for the 2022 budget information.
Yes, so in her letter, Desiree Kennedy asks us to consider in our 2022 budget estimates the need to consider any longer term impacts of the pandemic and recovery circumstances, but also to consider where service and our processes changes were made in response to the pandemic that could result in longer term efficiencies if they were to remain in place. And as part of the strategic planning process, Council has approved a tax rate increase of 2.4% in 2022, 2.3% in 2023, and the same for 2024 and 2025. And this includes a 1% for capital investment purposes. So for the budget presentation, we are being asked to continue to provide a detailed 2022 operating budget, as well as the projected increases through 2023 to 2025. And we'll also update our 15-year capital plan for inclusion into the city's consolidation capital budget and funding models. So generally speaking, we get our estimates into the city near the end of September. We have a budget presentation to the board in October, and the budget presentation to council occurs in November, near the end of November. They've given a range of dates that are potentially there for us between November 23rd and 25th.
Very good. Okay. Next is the board policy manual proposed amendments. And that's from Donna. And that's to us, the chair and service board. You want to talk on that?
Okay, the first one, it's pretty self-explanatory. The first one relates to changes to requirements as a result of the Missing Persons Act. And that includes reporting requirements of both the police service and the police services board. So the amendments I've outlined in the memo to the board policy would just capture that to ensure that these reports aren't missed, and it's a thing we have to do every year. So if you're okay with that, I just need a motion to approve those changes.
Mm-hmm. Jeff? Bridget, all in favor? Okay, motion accepted.
Okay, and the next one is just a further tweaking of the board rules of procedure bylaw, especially given that we are still having meetings in virtual platforms. It just helps us address some of the other logistical things that go along with having, live streamed and video recorded meetings. And also it also takes into consideration that there will be some changes coming once the new Community Safety and Policing Act is declared into force. And this amendment also tries to incorporate some of the things where the board wants to move forward with more information on the webpage. And that is one thing also that will be required when the new act is declared in force.
Okay. You want a motion for this?
Yes, yeah.
May I have a motion to for the change of the board rules and procedure bylaw? Jimmy? Anyone else? Bridget, thank you. All in favor? Good. Okay, that motion passed. Thanks for doing that, Donna.
Okay, no problem. And then the last one has to do with something that we've become more aware of in recent weeks and months, is that a lot of police agencies are trying to take advantage of bulk purchasing power. Now, and for some time, the board has been in purchasing groups such as the Police Cooperative Purchasing Group. For many, many years, the board has been able to take advantage of tendered prices through the Ministry of Government Services, through the province. And we also recently added the Ontario Education Collaborative Marketplace and Kinetic as other sources. But what we found is that some police services and boards, when they're going out for a tender, they say, we want, part of this process will also allow us to invite other police agencies to take advantage of this pricing. So the changes that I've outlined in the memo just takes that into consideration, so that we're not limited to just the Police Cooperative Purchasing Group or the Ontario Education Collaborative Marketplace or Ministry of Government Services, that would be also able to tag on to, and especially what some of the larger services are doing. And the cost savings can be quite significant. So it's really an advantage to do that. And I've noticed in the procedural policies of other boards, such as York, Halton, London, they actually include that in the board's purchasing policy, so that they can take advantage of these extra good pricing.
Right. That makes sense. So may I have a motion for that change? Bridget, Jeff, thank you. All in favor? Okay. Very good. Thank you, Donna. And then
Jared, do you mind if I just ask you a question?
yeah, please.
Related to that subject? Earlier we were talking about how expensive, or we heard how expensive software is. Have we ever looked into coordinating with the city, for example, for purchasing software?
We have, especially with under the human resources, so we're looking at collaborating with the city on some of the in PeopleSoft, some of the online learning components and modules. So that's something that Sonia has explored and is in the process of obtaining for us. And so those are good things to do, because PeopleSoft obviously is something that we also utilize. Comes as a cost.
Okay. So is there anything else added to the agenda, or is that it?
No, that was it.
Okay, then I'll ask for a motion to move in camera. Bridget, Jeff, all in favor? Good. Here we go. Thank you, everyone. And have a nice summer.